Departure.
Norman pulled the small Navy issue bag from beneath his bunk and C cylinder. He got his shaving kit from the bathroom, found his notebook and his extra pair of socks, and zipped the bag shut. "I'm ready." "Me too," Ted said. Ted was unhappy. He didn't want to leave. "I guess we can't delay it any longer. The weather's getting worse. They've got all the divers out from D-87 and now there's only us." Norman smiled at the prospect of being on the surface again. "I never thought I'd look forward to seeing a Navy battleship gray on a ship, but I do." "Where's the others?" Norman said. "Beth's already packed. I think she's with Barnes in communication. Harry too, I guess." Ted plucked at his jumpsuit. "I'll tell you one thing, I'll be glad to see the last of this suit." They left the sleeping quarters, heading down to communications. On the way, they squeezed past Teeny Fletcher, who was going towards B cylinder. "Ready to leave?" Norman said. "Yes, sir, all squared away," Fletcher said, but her features were tense, and she seemed rushed, under pressure. "Aren't you going the wrong way?" Norman asked. "Just checking the diesel backups." "Backups?" Norman thought. "Why check the backups now that we're leaving?" "She probably left something on that she shouldn't have," Ted said, shaking his head. In the communications console, the mood was grim. Barnes was on the phone with the surface vessels. "Say that again?" he said. "I want to hear who authorized that." He was frowning, angry. They looked at Tina. "How's the weather on the surface?" "Deteriorating fast, apparently." Barnes spun. "Will you idiots keep it down?" Norman dropped his day bag on the floor. Beth was sitting near the portholes, tired, rubbing her eyes. Tina was turning off the monitors one after another when she suddenly stopped. "Look." On one monitor, they saw the polished sphere. Harry was standing next to it. "What's he doing in there?" "Didn't he come back with us?" "I thought he did." "I didn't notice. I assumed he did." "God damn it, I thought I told you people," Barnes began and then stopped. He stared at the monitor. On the screen, Harry turned towards the video camera and made a short bow. "Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. I think you'll find this of interest." Harry turned towards the sphere. He stood with his arms at his sides, relaxed. He did not move or speak. He closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. The door to the sphere opened. "Not bad, huh?" Harry said, with a sudden grin. Then Harry stepped inside the sphere. The door closed behind him. They all began talking at once. Barnes was shouting over everyone else, shouting for quiet, but no one paid any attention until the lights in the habitat went out. They were plunged into darkness. Ted said, "What happened?" The only light came through the portholes, faintly from the grid lights. A moment later, the grid went out too. "No power." "I tried to tell you," Barnes said. There was a whirring sound and the lights flickered, then came back on. "We have internal power. We're running on our diesels now." "Why?" "Look," Ted said, pointing out the porthole. Outside they saw what looked like a wriggling silver snake. Then Norman realized it was the cable that linked them to the surface, sliding back and forth across the porthole as it coiled in great loops on the bottom. "They've cut us free." "That's right," Barnes said. "They got full gale force conditions topside. They can no longer maintain cables for power and communications. They can no longer use the submarines. They've taken all the divers up, but the subs can't come back for us. At least not for a few days, until the seas calm down." "Then we're stuck down here?" "That's correct." "For how long?" "Several days," Barnes said. "For how long?" "Maybe as long as a week." "Jesus Christ," Beth said. Ted tossed his bag onto the couch. "What a fantastic piece of luck," he said. Beth spun. "Are you out of your mind?" "Let's all stay calm," Barnes said. "Everything's under control. This is just a temporary delay. There's no reason to get upset." But Norman didn't feel upset. He felt suddenly exhausted. Beth was sulking, angry, feeling deceived. Ted was excited, already planning another excursion to the spacecraft, arranging equipment with Edmonds. But Norman felt only tired. His eyes were heavy. He thought he might go to sleep standing there in front of the monitors. He excused himself hurriedly, went back to his bunk, lay down. He didn't care that the sheets were clammy. He didn't care that the pillow was cold. He didn't care that diesels were droning and vibrating in the next cylinder. He thought, this is a very strong avoidance reaction. And then he was asleep.
Beyond Pluto.
Norman rolled out of bed and looked for his watch, but he had gotten into the habit of not wearing it. He had no idea what time it was, how long he had been asleep. He looked out through the porthole, saw nothing but black water. The grid lights were still off. He lay back in the bunk and looked at the gray pipes directly over his head. They seemed closer than before, as if they had moved toward him while he slept. Everything seemed cramped, tighter, more claustrophobic. Several more days of this, he thought. God. He hoped the Navy would think to notify his family. After so many days, Ellen would start to worry. He imagined her first calling the FAA, then calling the Navy, trying to find out what had happened. Of course, no one would know anything because the project was classified. Ellen would be frantic. Then he stopped thinking about Ellen. It was easier, he thought, to worry about your loved ones than to worry about yourself. But there wasn't any point. Ellen would be okay. And so would he. It was just a matter of waiting. Staying calm and waiting out the storm. He got into the shower, wondering if they'd still have hot water while the habitat was on emergency power. They did, and he felt less stiff after his shower. It was odd, he thought, to be 1,000 feet underwater and to relish the soothing effects of a hot shower. He dressed and headed for C cylinder. He heard Tina's voice say, "Think they'll ever get the sphere open?" Beth, "Maybe. I don't know. It scares me." "I don't think there's a reason to be scared." "It's the unknown," Tina said. When Norman came in, he found Beth running the videotape, looking at herself and Tina. "Sure," Beth said on the videotape, "but an unknown thing is not likely to be dangerous or frightening. It's most likely to be just inexplicable." Tina said, "I don't know how you can say that." "You afraid of snakes?" Beth said on screen. Beth snapped off the videotape. "Just trying to see if I could figure out why it opened," she said. "Any luck?" Norman said. "Not so far." On the adjacent monitor, they could see the sphere itself. The sphere was closed. "Harry still in there?" Norman said. "Yes," Beth said. "How long has it been now?" She looked up at the consoles. "A little more than an hour." "I only slept an hour?" "Yeah." "I'm starving," Norman said, and he went down to the galley to eat. All of the coconut cake was gone. He was looking for something else to eat when Beth showed up. "I don't know what to do, Norman," she said, frowning. "About what?" "They're lying to us," she said. "Who is?" "Barnes, the Navy, everybody. This is all a setup, Norman." "Come on, Beth, no conspiracies now. We have enough to worry about without—" "Just look at this," she said. She led him back upstairs, flicked on a console, pressed buttons. "I started putting it together when Barnes was on the phone," she said. "Barnes was talking to somebody right up to the moment when the cable started to coil down. Except that cable is 1,000 feet long, Norman. They would have broken communications several minutes before unhooking the cable itself." "Probably, yes." "So who was Barnes talking to at the last minute?" "Nobody." "Beth, look," she said, pointing to the screen. "Com, summary, DH, /Circom/1. 0900 hours. Barnes to Circom/1. Civilian and U.S. Navy personnel polled. Although advised of risk, all personnel were elected to remain down for duration of storm to continue investigation of alien sphere and associated spacecraft. Barnes, U.S. Navy." "You're kidding," Norm said. "I thought Barnes wanted to leave." "He did. But he changed his mind when he saw that last room, and he didn't bother to tell us." "I'd like to kill that bastard," Beth said. "You know what this is about, Norman, don't you?" Norman nodded. "He hopes to find a new weapon." "Right. Barnes is a Pentagon acquisition man, and he wants to find a new weapon." "But the sphere is unlikely—" "It's not the sphere," Beth said. "Barnes doesn't really care about the sphere. He cares about the
associated spacecraft, because according to the congruity theory, it's the spacecraft that is likely to pay off, not the sphere. Congruity theory was a troublesome matter for the people who thought about extraterrestrial life. In a simple way, the astronomers and physicists who considered the possibility of contact with extraterrestrial life imagined wonderful benefits to mankind from such a contact. But other thinkers, philosophers, and historians did not foresee any benefit to contact at all. For example, astronomers believed that if we made contact with extraterrestrials, mankind would be so shocked that wars on Earth would cease and a new era of peaceful cooperation between nations would begin. But historians thought that was nonsense. They pointed out that when Europeans discovered the New World, a similarly world-shattering discovery, the Europeans did not stop their incessant fighting. On the contrary, they fought even harder. Europeans simply made the New World an extension of pre-existing animosities. It became another place to fight and to fight over. Similarly, astronomers imagined that when mankind met extraterrestrials, there would be an exchange of information and technology, giving mankind a wonderful advancement. Historians of science thought that was nonsense too. They pointed out that what we called science actually consisted of a rather arbitrary conception of the universe, not likely to be shared by other creatures. Our ideas of science were the ideas of visually oriented, monkey-like creatures who enjoyed changing their physical environment. If the aliens were blind and communicated by odors, they might have evolved a very different science, which described a very different universe, and they might have made very different choices about the directions their sciences would have explored. For example, they might ignore the physical world entirely, and instead develop a highly sophisticated science of mind. In other words, the exact opposite of what Earth science has done. The alien technology might be purely mental, with no visible hardware at all. The issue was at the heart of congruity theory, which said that unless aliens were remarkably similar to us, no exchange of information was likely. Barnes, of course, knew that theory, so he knew he wasn't likely to derive any useful technology from the alien sphere. But he was very likely to get useful technology from the spaceship, since the spaceship had been made by men, and congruity was high, and he had lied to keep them down, to keep the search going. "What should we do with the bastard?" Beth said. "Nothing for the moment," Norman said. "You don't want to confront him?" "Jesus, I do." "It won't serve any purpose," Norman said. "Ted won't care, and the Navy people are all following orders. And anyway, even if it had been arranged for us to depart as planned, would you have gone, leaving Harry behind in the sphere?" "No," Beth admitted. "Well, then, it's all academic." "Jesus, Norman." "I know, but we're here now. And for the next couple of days, there's not a damn thing we can do about it. Let's deal with that reality as best we can and point the finger later." "You bet I'm going to point the finger." "That's fine, but not now, Beth." "Okay," she sighed. "Not now." She went back upstairs. Alone, Norman stared at the console. He had his work cut out for him, keeping everybody calm for the next few days. He hadn't looked into the computer system before, and he started pressing buttons. Pretty soon he found a file marked ULF Contact Team Blog. He opened it up. Civilian team members: Theodore Fielding, astrophysicist, planetary geologist. Elizabeth Halpern, zoologist, biochemist. Harold J. Adams, mathematician, logician. Arthur Levine, marine biologist, biochemist. John F. Thompson, psychologist. Choose one. Norman stared in disbelief at the list. He knew Jack Thompson, an energetic young psychologist from Yale. Thompson was world-renowned for his studies of psychology, and in fact for the past year had been somewhere in New Guinea, studying native tribes. Norman pressed more buttons. ULF psychologist, choices by rank. John F. Thompson, Yale, approved. William L. Hartz, UCB, approved. Jeremy White, UT, approved, pending clearance. Norman Johnson, SDU, rejected, age. He knew them all. Bill Hartz at Berkeley was seriously ill with cancer. Jeremy White had gone to Hanoi during the Vietnam War and would never get clearance. that left Norman. He understood now why he had been the last to be called in. He understood now about the special test. He felt a burst of intense anger at Barnes, and at the whole system which had brought him down here despite his age, with no concern for his safety. At 53, Norman Johnson had no business being 1,000 feet underwater in a pressurized exotic gas environment, and the Navy knew it. It was an outrage, he thought. He wanted to go upstairs and give Barnes hell in no uncertain terms. That lying son of a bitch! He gripped the arms of his chair and reminded himself of what he had told Beth. Whatever had happened up to this point, there was nothing any of them could do about it now. He would indeed give Barnes hell. He promised himself he would, but only when they got back to the surface. Until then, it was no use making trouble. He shook his head and swore. Then he turned the console off.
The hours crept by. Harry was still in the sphere. Tina ran her image intensification of the videotape that showed the sphere open, trying to see interior detail. "Unfortunately, we only have limited computing power in the habitat," she said. "If I could hard link to the surface, I could really do a job, but as it is..." She shrugged. She showed them a series of enlarged freeze frames from the open sphere. The images clicked through at 1-second intervals. The quality was poor, with jagged intermittent static. "The only internal structures we see in the blackness," Tina said, pointing to the opening, "are these multiple point sources of light. The lights appear to move from frame to frame." "It's as if the sphere is filled with fireflies," Beth said. "Except these lights are much dimmer than fireflies, and they don't blink. They are very numerous, and they give the impression of moving together in a surging pattern." "A flock of fireflies?" "Something like that." The tape ran out. The screen went dark. Ted said, "That's it?" "I'm afraid so, Dr. Fielding." "Poor Harry," Ted said mournfully. Of all the group, Ted was the most visibly upset about Harry. He kept staring at the closed sphere on the monitor, saying, "How did he do that?" Then he would add, "I hope he's all right." He repeated it so often that finally Beth said, "I think we know your feelings, Ted. I'm seriously concerned about him." "I am too. We all are." "You think I'm jealous, Beth? Is that what you're saying?" "Why would anyone think that, Ted?" Norman changed the subject. It was crucial to avoid confrontations among group members. He asked Ted about his analysis of the flight data aboard the spaceship. "Oh, it's very interesting," Ted said, warming to his subject. "My detailed examination of the earliest flight data images," he said, "convinced me that they showed 3 planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and the Sun, very small in the background. Therefore, the pictures are taken from some point beyond the orbit of Pluto. This suggests that the black hole is not far beyond our solar system." "Is that possible?" Norman said. "Oh, sure. In fact, for the last 10 years, some astrophysicists have suspected that there's a black hole, not a large one, but a black hole, just outside our solar system." "I hadn't heard that." "Oh, yeah. In fact, some of us have argued that, if it was small enough, in a few years we could go out and capture the black hole, bring it back, park it in Earth orbit, and use the energy it generates to power the entire planet." Barnes smiled. "Black hole cowboys?" "In theory, there's no reason it couldn't be done. Then just think. The entire planet would be free of its dependency on fossil fuels. The whole history of mankind would be changed." Barnes said, "Probably make a hell of a weapon, too." "Even a very tiny black hole would be a little bit too powerful to use as a weapon. So you think this ship went out to capture a black hole?" "Oh, I doubt it," Ted said. "The ship is so strongly made, and so shielded against radiation, that I suspect it was intended to go through a black hole." "And it did." "And that's why the ship went back in time," Norman said. "I'm not sure," Ted said. "You see, a black hole really is the edge of the universe. What happens there isn't clear to anybody now alive. But what some people think is that you don't go through the hole, you sort of skip into it, like a pebble skipping over water, and you get bounced into a different time or space or universe." "So the ship got bounced?" "Yes, possibly more than once. And when it bounced back here, it undershot and arrived a few hundred years before it left." "And on one of the bounces it picked up that?" Beth said, pointing to the monitor. They looked. The sphere was still closed. But lying next to it, sprawled on the deck in an awkward pose, was Harry Adams. For a moment they thought he was dead. Then Harry lifted his head and moaned.
The subject.
Norman wrote in his notebook. Subject is a 30-year-old black mathematician who has spent 3 hours inside a sphere of unknown origin. On recovery from the sphere, was stuporous and unresponsive. He did not know his name, where he was, or what year it was. Brought back to the habitat. Slept for 1/2 hour, then awoke abruptly, complaining of headache. Oh, God. Harry was sitting in his bunk, holding his head in his hands, groaning. Hurt? Norman said. Brutal. Pounding. Anything else? Thirsty. God. He licked his lips. Really thirsty. Extreme thirst, Norman wrote. Rose Levy, the cook, showed up with a glass of lemonade. Norman handed the glass to Harry, who drank it in a single gulp. Passed it back. More. Better bring a pitcher, Norman said. Levy went off. Norman turned to Harry, still holding his head, still groaning, and said, I have a question for you. What? What's your name? Norman, I don't need to be psychoanalyzed right now. Just tell me your name. Harry Adams, for Christ's sake. What's the matter with you? Oh, my head. You didn't remember before, Norman said. When we found you. When you found me? He asked. He seemed confused again. Norman nodded. Do you remember when we found you? It must have been outside. Outside? Harry looked up, suddenly furious, eyes glowing with rage. Outside the sphere, you goddamn idiot! What do you think I'm talking about? Take it easy, Harry. Your questions are driving me crazy. Okay. Take it easy. Emotionally unstable. Rage and irritability. Norman made more notes. Do you have to make so much noise? Norman looked up, puzzled. Your pen, Harry said. It sounds like Niagara Falls. Norman stopped writing. It must be a migraine, or something like a migraine. Harry was holding his head in his hands delicately, as if it were made of glass. Why can't I have any aspirin, for Christ's sake? We don't want to give you anything for a while, in case you hurt yourself. We need to know where the pain is. The pain, Norman, is in my head. It's in my goddamn head. Now why won't you give me any aspirin? Barnes said not to. Is Barnes still here? We're all still here. Harry looked up slowly. But you were supposed to go to the surface. I know. Why didn't you go? The weather went bad and they couldn't send the subs. Well, you should go. You shouldn't be here, Norman. Levy arrived with more lemonade. Harry looked at her as he drank. You're still here, too? Yes, Dr. Adams. How many people are down here altogether? Levy said, There are 9 of us here, sir. Jesus. He passed the glass back. Levy refilled it. You should all go. You should leave. Harry, Norman said. We can't go. You have to. Norman sat on the bunk opposite Harry and watched as Harry drank. Harry was demonstrating a rather typical manifestation of shock. The agitation, the irritability, the nervous manic flow of ideas, the unexplained fear for the safety of others. It was all characteristic of shocked victims of severe accidents, such as major auto crashes and airplane crashes. Given an intense event, the brain struggled to assimilate, to make sense, to reassemble the mental world even as the physical world was shattered around it. The brain went into a kind of overdrive, hastily trying to reassemble things, to get things right, to reestablish equilibrium. Yet it was fundamentally a confused period of wheel spinning. You just had to wait it out. Harry finished the lemonade, handed the glass back. More? Levy said. No, that's good. Headache's better. Perhaps it was dehydration after all, Norman thought. But why would Harry be dehydrated after only 3 hours in the sphere? Harry, tell me something. Do I look different, Norman? No. I look the same to you? Yes, I'd say so. Are you sure? Harry said. He jumped up, went to a mirror mounted on the wall. He peered at his face. How do you think you look? Norman said. I don't know. Different. Different how? I don't know! He pounded the padded wall next to the mirror. The mirror image vibrated. He turned away, sat down on the bunk again. He sighed. Just different. Harry, what? Do you remember what happened? Of course. What happened? I went inside. He waited, but Harry said nothing further. He just stared at the carpeted floor. Do you remember opening the door? Harry said nothing. How did you open the door, Harry? Harry looked up at Norman. You were all supposed to leave. To go back to the surface. You weren't supposed to stay. How did you open the door, Harry? There was a long silence. I opened it. He sat up straight, his hands at his side. He seemed to be remembering, reliving it. And then? I went inside. And what happened inside? It was beautiful. What was beautiful? The foam, Harry said, and then he fell silent again, staring vacantly into space. The foam? Norman prompted. The sea, the foam. Beautiful. Was he talking about the lights? Norman wondered. The swirling patterns of lights? What was beautiful, Harry? Now don't kid me, Harry said. Promise you won't kid me. No, I won't kid you. You think I look the same? Yes, I do. You don't think I've changed at all? No, not that I can see. Do you think you've changed? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe. Did something happen in the sphere to change you? You don't understand about the sphere. Then explain it to me, Norman said. Nothing happened in the sphere. You were in the sphere for 3 hours. Nothing happened. Nothing ever happens inside the sphere. It's always the same inside the sphere. What's always the same? The foam? The foam is always different. The sphere is always the same. I don't understand, Norman said. I know you don't, Harry said. He shook his head. What can I do? Tell me some more. There isn't any more. Then tell me again. It won't help, Harry said. Do you think you'll be leaving soon? Barnes said not for several days. I think you should leave soon. Talk to the others. Convince them. Make them leave. Why, Harry? I can't be... I don't know. Harry rubbed his eyes and lay back on the bed. You'll have to excuse me, he said, but I'm very tired. Maybe we can continue this some other time. I'll talk to the others, Norman. Get them to leave. It's dangerous to stay here. And he lay down in the bunk and closed his eyes.